Millionaire woman lost her way in rural town. A poor farmer took her in and got an unexpected visitor. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class gleamed under the harsh afternoon sun as it sat motionless on the dusty shoulder of a forgotten county road in rural Nebraska. Steam rose from its hood like a prayer ascending to heaven, while inside, Victoria Ashford gripped the steering wheel with manicured fingers that had never known a day of manual labor. At 42, Victoria commanded boardrooms in Manhattan with the same ruthless precision that had built her real estate empire worth $300 million. Her Armani suit, now wrinkled from hours of driving, spoke of a world where problems were solved with phone calls and checkbooks. But here, surrounded by endless cornfields and a horizon that seemed to mock her GPS's frantic recalculations, money felt as useless as the designer heels that pinched her feet. She had been driving for 6 hours, fleeing from the suffocating expectations of her upcoming merger with Blackstone Properties. The deal would make her the most powerful woman in New York real estate, but something deep within her soul had rebelled against the gilded cage of success. So she had done something completely out of character. She had driven west without a destination, seeking something she couldn't name. The irony wasn't lost on her. A woman who owned half of Manhattan's skyline couldn't figure out how to fix a simple overheated engine. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Victoria noticed a figure approaching from across the field. He moved with the unhurried gait of someone who had never known the frantic pace of city life. Thomas Mackenzie was 51, though his weathered face and calloused hands told the story of decades spent coaxing life from stubborn soil. Thomas had inherited his 100-acre farm from his father, who had inherited it from his father before him. 3 generations of Mackenzies had worked this land, and Thomas took pride in continuing that legacy, even though modern farming had left small operations like his struggling to survive. His wife Sarah had passed 5 years ago from cancer, leaving him alone with nothing but the memory of their shared dreams and the weight of a mortgage that grew heavier each season. When Thomas saw the expensive car broken down on the road that bordered his property, his first instinct was to help. It wasn't in his nature to leave someone stranded, regardless of their circumstances. He approached cautiously, noting the woman's obvious distress and the stark contrast between her polished appearance and the rural setting. Victoria's initial reaction was a mixture of relief and suspicion. In her world, strangers were competitors, and kindness usually came with a price tag. But Thomas's genuine concern and his offer to help her get to town seemed sincere, though. She couldn't shake the feeling that accepting assistance from this simple farmer was somehow beneath her station. The nearest town was 20 miles away, and the local mechanic wouldn't be available until morning. Thomas, seeing her predicament and the approach in darkness, did what any decent person would do in rural America. He offered her a place to stay for the night. His farmhouse was a modest 2-story structure that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged slightly on one side, and the screen door hung askew on its hinges. But the interior was clean and comfortable, decorated with handmade quilts and family photographs that spoke of love and loss, joy and sorrow. Victoria found herself in a world she had never experienced. There was no room service, no marble countertops, no infinity pool overlooking the Hudson River. Instead, there was a kitchen where Thomas prepared a simple meal of grilled chicken, fresh corn from his own fields, and tomatoes still warm from the vine. The food was more delicious than anything she had eaten in the finest restaurants of Manhattan. As night fell over the prairie, Victoria sat on the front porch, watching fireflies dance in the darkness. The silence was profound. No car horns, no sirens, no constant hum of the city that never sleeps. For the first time in years, she could hear her own thoughts without the interference of corporate demands and social obligations. Thomas shared stories of his life on the farm, speaking of seasons and cycles, of the satisfaction that came from planting seeds and watching them grow. He talked about his late wife Sarah, their plans to expand the farm, and the dreams that died with her. His words carried a weight that resonated with Victoria's own sense of loss, not of a person, but of the woman she had once been before ambition consumed her soul. The guest room was simple but comfortable, with a brass bed covered in a quilt that Sarah had made during the early years of their marriage. Victoria lay awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of a world she had never known. The gentle lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through corn stalks, the distant call of an owl hunting in the darkness. For the first time in decades, she fell asleep without reviewing tomorrow's schedule or worrying about stock prices and market fluctuations. Instead, she dreamed of wide-open spaces and the simple pleasure of watching the sunrise paint the world in gold. Victoria woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the gentle warmth of sunlight streaming through lace curtains. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of dew-dampened earth and the promise of a perfect autumn day. She had slept more soundly than she had in years, her body finally releasing the tension that had become her constant companion. Thomas was already up, having completed his morning chores of feeding the livestock and checking on his crops. He prepared breakfast with the same quiet efficiency that marked everything he did. Fresh eggs from his own chickens, bacon from a pig he had raised himself, and coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead Dot as they sat at the kitchen table. Surrounded by the simple rhythm of farm life, Victoria found herself sharing details of her life that she had never told anyone. She spoke of the loneliness that success had brought, the way wealth had isolated her from genuine human connection, and the growing sense that she had traded her soul for an empire of glass and steel. Thomas listened without judgment, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had seen better days. He understood her pain in a way that surprised her, the isolation of loss, the weight of responsibility, the search for meaning in a world that seemed increasingly empty. 3 days passed in this peaceful routine. Victoria's assistant called repeatedly, but she ignored the messages that grew increasingly frantic. The merger deadline was approaching, and Blackstone Properties was demanding her presence in New York. But for the first time in her adult life, Victoria felt no urgency to return to the corporate battlefield. She learned to appreciate the simple pleasures that had been absent from her life, the satisfaction of collecting eggs from the henhouse, the meditative quality of shelling peas. On the front porch, the joy of watching Thomas's face light up when he talked about his plans for next season's crop. The transformation was subtle but profound. Victoria's designer clothes gave way to borrowed jeans and cotton shirts. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her hands, once soft as silk, began to show the honest calluses of manual labor. She felt more like herself than she had in years. On the fourth morning, everything changed. A black limousine appeared at the end of the long driveway, its polished surface reflecting the morning sun like a dark mirror. Victoria's heart sank as she recognized the vehicle. It belonged to Richard Blackstone, her potential business partner and the man who had been pursuing her both professionally and personally for the past 2 years. Richard emerged from the limousine wearing a $1,000 suit and an expression of barely controlled anger. At 55, he was everything Victoria had once thought she wanted: wealthy, powerful, and utterly ruthless in his pursuit of success. His private investigators had tracked her to this remote farm, and his presence here felt like a violation of the sanctuary she had found. Thomas watched the scene unfold with growing understanding. This was Victoria's world calling her back, demanding that she return to the life she had tried to escape. The contrast between the two men was stark. Richard with his polished sophistication and barely concealed arrogance, Thomas with his quiet dignity and genuine compassion. Richard's proposal was everything Victoria had worked toward her entire career. The merger would create the largest real estate empire on the East Coast, with Victoria as its queen. He painted a picture of unlimited power, of penthouse offices and private jets. of a life where she would want for nothing. But as she looked at Thomas, standing quietly in the doorway of his humble farmhouse, Victoria realized that she had already found what she had been searching for. It wasn't power or wealth or the admiration of her peers. It was the simple pleasure of belonging somewhere, of mattering to someone who valued her for who she was rather than what she could accomplish. The choice before her was clear, though not easy. She could return to New York, complete the merger, and continue building her empire of glass and steel. Or she could stay in this place that had healed her soul, with this man who had shown her what it meant to live rather than simply exist. Victoria's decision surprised everyone, including herself. She chose to stay. Richard's departure was as abrupt as his arrival, his limousine disappearing down the dusty road like a mirage. Victoria stood in the farmyard, watching the dust settle, feeling lighter than she had in years. She had walked away from $300 million and the chance to rule Manhattan's skyline, but she had gained something far more valuable: a chance at happiness. The transformation was complete when Victoria called her assistant and instructed her to liquidate her assets and establish a charitable foundation. The money would go to programs that supported small farmers and rural communities. A fitting legacy for someone who had discovered that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. As autumn deepened into winter, Victoria and Thomas worked side by side to prepare the farm for the coming season. They spoke of plans for the future, expanding the organic vegetable garden, perhaps adding a few more cattle, maybe even opening a small farm stand where city folks could come to taste what real food was supposed to taste like. The woman who had once commanded boardrooms now found joy in feeding chickens and preserving the harvest. The man who had thought his heart died with his wife discovered that love could bloom again, even in the most unexpected places. On a cold December evening, as snow began to fall outside the kitchen window, Victoria realized that she had found what she had been searching for all along. It wasn't in the corporate towers of Manhattan or the exclusive clubs of the Upper East Side. It was here, in this simple farmhouse, with this good man who had shown her that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought or sold. The millionaire woman who had lost her way in a rural town had found something far more precious than money. She had found herself.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.